Record. So, hey everyone, welcome to Awoken. My name is Misty Cogdill, and this is the Handwriting for the Soul. I'm super excited today. I'm going to be interviewing Robin Tapp, and she's an amazing expert. With being a handwriting expert myself, obviously, your handwriting is a map on paper to how you think. It's a graphic representation to your thought patterns, so I'm able to see where you're limited and what is holding you back to then advance you forward. So handwriting for the soul, we've got so much to share with you, but I'm super excited today. I wanted to bring Robin on because as I've said before, handwriting is a slice of the pie to your personal growth and development. And I love to interview other people who have the other slices to the pie, is what I like to call it. So with Robin here today, I just want to welcome Robin. Robin Tapp is the founder of Bountiful Health. Robin is a health and wholeness expert who has spent the past 30 years helping others improve their lives through realigning with their inner source of health and healing. Rather than focusing on illness, dis-ease, or woundedness in the body, she helps her clients find resonance with the parts of themselves that feel good, that feel whole, and that allow it to inform whatever healing process is needed right here, right now. So I'm so excited to hear more about the specifics of how she does this and how it all works. So please help me welcome Robin Tapp to the show. Hi, Robin.
Hey, Misty, how are you? Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you are able to come on and share with us the many gifts and talents that you have with so many people that you've been working with, and and being able to basically, a lot of what you do is you take people to the next level in their body and bring about some healing and some understanding of the body and what's really going on inside the body.
Yeah.
Were you always interested in health and wellness, and kind of how did you get into all of the expertise that you do?
Well, actually, no, actually, I actually started my adult life as a satellite engineer in the Air Force. I have a degree in aerospace engineering, so I'm a bona fide rocket scientist. I spent 5 years doing that, and it was really fun and exciting. But as you said, I've been doing this for about 30 years, and about 31 years ago, my mother was actually killed in an accident. She was very young, and in just that quick moment, she was gone. I was really heartbroken, but it gave me a chance to step back from my life and to see what I was doing, and then to really make a decision about how I wanted to live the rest of my life. With her being so young, it really showed me that our life is very, very short, and we really need to be doing something that makes sense to us and makes us feel like we're contributing to the world. So this actually led me to recalibrate my life a little bit and to something that I felt was more meaningful, and also where I had the ability to control my own time, work for myself, because when you're in the Air Force, you belong to the military 24/7, and I really wanted to get my own time back. A friend of mine suggested that I looked into her line of work, which was massage therapy. And what I realized is that the systems of the human body aren't unlike a satellite vehicle. We have a computer, which is our brain, right? We have an internal communication system, which is our nervous system.
Yep.
We use fuel or food to give us energy and to move us around, and we give off waste products. And we also have a physical structure.
Yeah.
And yet, people are just so much more interesting than satellites, because people have thoughts, beliefs, emotions, and these, I found out that these actually affect the physical health. So when you go into a bodywork career, you have to receive a lot of body work. You get worked on a lot for that year that you're in training. And I actually kind of got a little hooked on it. But what I realized was that the more work I was getting done on myself, the more emotional stuff that was getting unraveled and healed in the process, even though it was a physical process that I was having done to me. So it set me on a bit of a spiritual journey, and I was really eager to find out how these were related and to study that. Our spirituality and emotional well-being plays as much a part of our total health as anything physical. And then years later, I ended up finding authors like Louise Hay who had discovered the same thing and wrote about it. So that's when I expanded my practice to include different offerings that address all aspects of a person's health, because I found out that our partial well-being isn't really helpful for our health, physical or otherwise.
Yeah. I love that you said Louise Hay, because I'm a big fan of her work as well, and discovered her in 2008. And she wrote the book, You Can Heal Your Life.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I named my book after her, with You Can Heal Your Life with handwriting. So I've adored her work. Everything, the place that she comes from was, authentic love, and just having love for the planet and love for people, and just, she was just such a great impact in the world. And I loved how in the back of the book, You Can Heal Your Life, there's an index for the body, and all of what's going on in the body, there's a thought pattern in the mindset that is actually reflected in the body. So, for example, if you have bleeding gums, you can look that up, and what does that mean? And there's a whole index in the back. And I looked that up, the other day, and it was saying a lack of joy, that maybe there's too much stress in your life. And then there's a new thought pattern that you can then begin to write.
Right.
If you begin to write, it will support you to shift those thought patterns. Can you tell me kind of how you grew from, you said that you studied her a little bit, and just kind of how things formed from there? And
well, first, let me say that the other thing I loved about Louise Hay is that her book came from personal experience. She had breast cancer, and this is why she even started studying this. And she actually, she had I can't say that she was cured, obviously, because you're never really cured from cancer, but she lived a very, very long life because she took care of those emotional things in her well-being, in her total well-being package. And one of the ways that I use that in my practice is that when I'm working with somebody hands-on, when we find places, if there is an emotional component, and we don't always see one, it doesn't mean it's not there. It's just maybe it's not as prevalent in the moment. But when we do find it, we can actually talk through some things. So, and it isn't like I'm doing counseling or anything like that. It's just that we want that person to be aware of the underlying reasons, because it's like if you go out in your garden and you have weeds in your garden, if you just keep cutting them, they're going to keep coming back because you haven't gotten the root. You have to make sure to get as much of the root as possible to let the body heal properly.
Yes, I love that. I love that analogy, and it's so true, because exactly, if you just cut the weed off, you're not getting the root, and it's just going to keep growing back and keep growing back and keep growing back,
and sometimes getting stronger and stronger.
Yes. So until you dig deep and you remove that root from the ground and actually pull it out, is when the weed will truly be gone. But how many of us with our lives today do we not pull the root out, and we just keep chopping it and keep chopping it, and it keeps growing back, and then we're nobody's understanding. But there are different techniques out there, that will pull the root out, and that's one of the reasons why I think I loved handwriting so much, is it was one part of the root to, it goes back to childhood. I started writing in kindergarten, and started asking questions, and when I was like 3 or 4 years old. So with what you do, you bring in, you're noticing the body. Can you share with us kind of what someone can expect when they walk into your office, and just exactly what you do, and how, just walk us through like maybe an appointment, if someone was interested and then they came to you, what they might expect?
Sure, yeah. Well, these days, especially with what's going on with COVID and what's going on in the world, people are really scared. And so I do a really varied approach to my work. The actual therapy that I do, the hands-on therapy, I love it so much. It's called craniosacral therapy. So cranium is the head, the sacral part is the lower part of the spine. And so I work a lot with the spine, but they come in, and so I'm going to do some hands-on therapy with them. But because of what's going on today, I actually will sit and talk with them first, because a lot of people right now, especially, they need to kind of emotionally unpack, call it unpacking, before they can even get on a table. So I leave about 90 minutes for each client, so I have plenty of time to do that if it's needed. So I'm going to explain what craniosacral therapy is first, and then I'll kind of share the other parts of the work that I use to support it.
Okay.
So craniosacral therapy, like I said, is hands-on, but it's very, very light touch. I use about the pressure of the weight of a nickel. And I put my hands on a person's body, and we do it on a massage table in a quiet room. The client stays fully clothed, and I make sure that they're very, very warm and comfortable, because the whole thing is about getting the body to respond in a good way, and not push them into a place where they're going to resist it. So, but before I place my hands on anyone, though, I have to ground myself, and I want to calm them and ground them as much as I can. So I have them do a couple of deep breaths and get them to relax a little bit. So the analogy I like to use here is, have you ever been in a swimming pool that has the lanes that the racing pools?
Yep.
Well, there's a line on the bottom of the pool, right? That tells you where your lane is.
Yep.
If the water is really agitated, you can't see that line very well. And it's kind of the same in a person's body. When they're really agitated, if I put my hands on them, I really can't tell what's going on and find out where that center line is. And that's what I'm looking for, is because I'm going to get that person to realign with that. I'm not fixing anything. I'm actually trying to get them to realign with themselves. So I need to be able to kind of see that alignment inside me first. So after a couple deep breaths by both of us, I will typically start at the head, and I just put my hands on their head, and I get a kind of a reading of what's going on in the person's system. Our body actually has this breathing pattern. It's very, very subtle, but your head will actually expand and contract like this. And I've been taught to be very, very sensitive to feel that. And when I do that, I'm kind of connecting with them kind of on an energetic level, on a whole person level, so that I can kind of feel what's going on in that person's system and see where the first place we need to address. So as the session progresses, the client's system will kind of begin to unfold and show me the areas where attention is needed and wanted. The body's fully in charge. The client's body is fully in charge, and I'm kind of the partner. If you were to think of a couple waltzing, I'm not the lead, I'm the partner. And so I need to follow where the body directs me. So when I start on the head, and then I let things start to unfold. And so I'll end up moving around the table and putting my hands on several places in the body, depending upon what kind of opens up for me and shows me. It kind of lights up in a way. Sometimes I will send some information about a certain handhold, and this is where what we were talking about earlier comes in. I actually had a client on the table one time, and her knee was kind of calling to me, so I went down to her knee, and I was holding it, and I just cup my hands kind of like this, and I kind of saw a bicycle, and I said, have you ever injured your knee, or did you ever injure your knee when you were a child? And she tells me the story about when she was a kid and she was riding on the handlebars of her brother's bicycle, and they were laughing and having fun, and she did that a lot, I guess. Well, she accidentally stuck her toe in the front spokes, and they both tumbled, and she hit the ground with her knee. And he was teasing her about it. I mean, not mean, and just in oh, I can't believe you were so stupid, kind of thing. And it had locked itself into her knee. Wow. She didn't even remember the incident until I was starting to work on her knee. It was kind of buried in there. Wow. And once we got that worked through, she said, yeah, if I hike too far, my knee would actually act up and get stiff on me. She said after that, it never happened again.
Wow.
So yeah, and so sometimes these things that we consider emotional, it's not even necessarily traumatic. It's just there. It's just something that our body stored for some reason, and by allowing the body to release that and to let that movement flow the way it's supposed to, it's amazing what can happen. Wow, so that's how the craniosacral stuff works. And And I just love it because it really does tap into the intelligence that the body actually has. And that's the piece that's so wonderful. I don't have to sit there and figure out what to do next and what needs to happen. The amazing thing about that is that the body will never let me do more than the body can handle. So I'm never going to injure the person. I'm never going to go too far. I have to make sure to we open a person up, and I have to make sure to put them back together, so to speak. Otherwise they get a little woozy and wobbly, but it's never going to be to the point where they're going to have a problem because of the work I do. The body just won't allow that to happen.
Right. But so basically what you're saying, and what we've both read in that book, You Can Heal Your Life, is that our body is a reflection of our thought patterns, and they really go hand in hand.
Yeah.
What you might think on a continuous basis, for 20 years can then show up in the body much later and maybe show up as a dis-ease.
Yes.
And kind of connecting the two, because some people don't know that. I mean, obviously I've been familiar with it, but there's several people that I've spoken to that they don't understand that. Do you have an explanation that somebody comes into your office and they don't know quite what that means? How do you explain something like that to one of your clients that is maybe new to this type of concept?
That's really a great question. One of the things that I like to say is, do you ever people watch? And if you ever sit in we can't really go to the mall anymore, but if you ever sat like in an airport and you watch people walk by, you can see people you can see it when people are sad. You can see it when people feel burdened. They have this kind of hunched over place. You can see when there's so many, when we're paying attention, we can see that there's something going on with that person. We may not know what it is. That just takes training. That just takes education to know what that means. And that's why good actors are so good, because they can convey that with a physicalness that they don't even have to say the words. I mean, particularly in I love old movies, and in old movies, you can see it, they can do a facial expression, or they can do a certain movement with their body, and you know exactly what they're trying to convey. That's because we all understand it on a gut level, even if we don't know it intellectually. So that's kind of how I explain that.
Yeah, wow, that's a really good explanation, because I've done several explanations, and always looking for new nuggets, so to speak, to share with people. And some people are new to this, and some people are very well educated in it. How did you come to find the book You Can Heal Your Life? Was that did somebody give it to you, or did you
that's a really good question. I'm sure they did. Probably it was probably the woman that I this friend that kind of talked me into going into massage therapy. It was probably her, because she was a mentor of mine for a lot. She ended up becoming one of my business partners, actually, that in this office I was telling you about. She was a really wonderful mentor, and she was actually dating a chiropractor who was also a very good friend of our family. So it's probably one of those two that offered it to me first. Because the chiropractors usually will they understand this stuff too. I think what we consider, or what we used to consider alternative health, I think is really on the forefront of understanding and explaining to people the holistic version of what health is, because we're starting to realize that we're not pieces and parts. We're one whole, and if there's anything out of whack in the whole, the whole is going to be out of whack.
I love that. That's a really good explanation of it too, because I had found the book You Can Heal Your Life. Louise Hay was on Oprah in February of 2008, and the reason why I remember is because it was the day before my birthday. I was always like, oh, this was a birthday present from the universe, so I absolutely loved it. But I loved her work from that moment forward, and continued to study her in depth and detail. So And
Right.
what you did, because it was like we had some similarities of interests, and how kind of what I do and what you do, and it was like, wow, we kind of go hand in hand, and have another slice of the pie, as I like to say.
Exactly, because emotional patterns evoke physical patterns, whether it's handwriting, or whether it's the way you stand or sit, or the way you walk and move, the way you speak, the way I mean, you see people women in particular, that have these really quiet voices or really high pitched voices that sound almost childlike. That actually gives something away about their personality, and about how they see themselves in the world. And that's what I like to say. It's about how you see the world and how you see yourself in it. Is it a safe place? Is it a loving place and a kind place? Is it some place to be afraid of, or to be are people to be wary of, or can you be open and friendly? And you can see that in the way people hold themselves. And absolutely, as they hold themselves a certain way, that is going to alter the way their blood flows, the way the nervous system works, the way their brain functions even. They have found that older people, when they start looking down you see older people, they'll look at their feet when they're walking because they're not comfortable, they're afraid of tripping. And that actually starts to cause depression, because our brain is not meant to be in this position. It's meant to be in this position. And when you look down, it actually changes the way the brain gives feedback to your emotional state as well as your body.
Wow. What do you do? I mean, obviously you're very familiar with emotions. I've studied emotions quite a bit as well too. What can you say, or do you work with people on an emotional level? Like if they come in and they've had emotional trauma that they might not even be aware of. I know, like you said with the lady with the bicycle, but say somebody comes in and they have emotional trauma, maybe a lack of self-forgiveness of maybe something they've done. Are you able to work with people with their emotions and kind of help them kind of figure out? I mean, obviously the one lady was with the bicycle, but I'm just thinking if somebody came in and maybe they did something wrong as a child and they, thought they were, bad or wrong or something, or something happened to a child that was out of their control and somebody else maybe did something. How do you work with the people with their emotional state? Like, do you do different releasing techniques to kind of clear those emotions besides?
Well, those emotions, we'll find them in the body, because again, we're working with the whole system. So even though I'm feeling into the tissue, and I'm feeling how the energy is working through the tissue, where I'm also working with the emotional body and the spiritual body. I mean, depending upon how my attention and where I put it, the more spiritual body, for example, is the biggest part of us. I actually have to kind of expand my attention into my spiritual body so that I can connect with that other person's spiritual body. I have found that I actually had a client years ago who had a heart transplant, and the heart he received came from a teenage boy. And part of the work that we did was, he was guilty. He felt guilty as a 40-something-year-old man having the heart of I think it was a 17-year-old child in his chest, keeping him alive. And that is the guilt is actually one of the things that will cause a heart transplant patient to die quicker, because as you have the guilt feelings, your body starts to reject the heart. And that's actually documented in a book. In this, my client actually gave me this book to shed some light on that. But that was the first thing we started working on, was this guilt pattern that he had, and it was I could feel it in his chest.
Wow. Guilt, when you bring that up, it's interesting because I've studied the book with Eckhart Tolle, which it was titled A New Earth, and he had talked about the power of guilt in that book. And one of the things that he referenced with the class, because I was a big fan of Oprah, and they had done a class with that book. It was the world's largest classroom in 2008. And he had referenced, I think it was Jenny McCarthy and her like 4-year-old son, that she had felt guilty as a mom for leaving. And he said guilt was the ego. And I found that very fascinating. I was like, guilt is the ego. I'm like, I thought guilt was to help you from not doing something wrong. So it was a different perspective. What's your view on guilt based on what you just shared? Do you have any idea, any concept of your tip on it?
Yeah, and guilt, what I've found, typically guilt ends up being misdirected. Now, I'm with you. I think there can be, hopefully, there's a guilt if you think you've done something to hurt somebody. But if you keep exercising that and keep revisiting it again and again, it becomes a pattern in your body, and you start to hold. And I can't remember where Louise Hayes said that was. I think it had to do in the gut or something. But it's you literally will start holding a place in your body because it feels horrible. It feels horrible. And so our bodies are there to keep us alive, and it will stay in balance as best it can. So it will kind of cordon off a place that feels bad, but then that place doesn't get the blood flow and the movement pattern that it needs to do to be healthy. And so that the guilt will literally start to eat away at you. And some people even say that sometimes guilt and anger can be major pieces to cancer. I don't know that there's been any research done on that, but I do know that when with my client, I could feel it around in his chest, around the heart itself, because as that started to release, he started to lighten up so much. It was amazing. And his wife said that he actually started propagating violets again. It was a hobby that he had for years and years and hadn't touched since the heart transplant. And he asked her to get out his pots, and he started doing this hobby again. It was something he loved. So it keeps us from the things that we enjoy, because they don't feel good anymore. You have this cloud hanging over you. So I don't think guilt is a good emotion. I really don't think it's a good emotion to hold on to. And it's really helpful. And I'll let you know that I'm not a counselor and I'm not a psychotherapist. So it's not that I counsel people, but if I find that there's something that we're working on and they're still kind of stuck in that, I do refer out for those kinds of things. But a lot of times just talking through it and just becoming aware that it's there is enough to get it to shift. And that's really what we're looking at, is we're trying to get the whole system to shift so that the body can then be in a place where it's healthy again.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I know I've had certain thoughts with as I've observed handwriting, you can kind of see in certain patterns and in certain people's signatures or whatnot that they're withholding something.
Mm-hmm.
And I had studied, like, what do secrets do? If you're withholding a secret and you're not releasing it, can that eat away at the body for 20 years and not be released? I'm sure you've probably come into that maybe something's happened with somebody's body that's not responding properly, something like that sometimes would be guilt that then you withhold in and it can turn into cancer. I've done a little bit of research on that too. It's just people's bodies are a walking testimony. I remember Louise Hayes saying, that you can see somebody's expression on their face, when they're older, that they've lived a lifetime of either joy or sadness or anger, that it really shows on a person's body. And that was, when I was reading that, I was like, wow, I never thought of that before. But she really opened my eyes in reading her book, as well as, all the work that she's done. I've studied a lot of her work. And it's just interesting how and I love the body. So can you tell me, how does cranial sacral, if I said that correctly, therapy differ from energy work such as Reiki and therapeutic touch?
Well, first of all, it is a hands-on body work. So I'm actually putting my hands and feeling into the tissues, into the fluids. We have a lot of fluid in our body, and most specifically, I feel into the cerebrospinal fluid, which is the fluid that the cushions the brain and the spinal cord.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually put my hands on the person, and I do feel the energy. I can feel energy moving through the body, and we can work with that level as well. But it's not as common as working with the body, just because once I find wherever the blocked off places, I like to use use an analogy of if we had energy flowing through our body like a river. If you threw a big rock into the river, that stream of energy gets redirected. And so my work then is to kind of find out where those rocks are and help that person dissolve it and get rid of it. I'm not doing, like I said, I'm not doing the work. The person themselves, their intelligence, their stream of life, we call it the breath of life. It's kind of what Abraham Hicks talks about with when you align yourself with the wholeness of you, that's when you can be more healthy. And if there's these blockages in the system, then you don't have that full alignment. You end up getting little eddies and little spirals that come off of it, and that's what I'm feeling for. So the body basically pinches off the energy, and that's what causes the disease. So I guess that's such a great question, and I have that misunderstanding a lot. I actually had a lady one time who she had a religious issue with energy work in general, and unfortunately, because she thought that's what I did, she wouldn't even let me work on her. And I feel like I could have probably helped her, but that's the other thing is we have to work with people's belief systems, and we have to work with their understanding of life. And sometimes that means that they're going to make a choice that where I can't help them.
Yeah.
But that's their choice.
Right. Right.
So, but the other piece I like to talk about when I'm talking about energy work is, and I think energy work is an amazing modality, but a lot of energy workers that I've met do not really understand anatomy and physiology. And I've been trained heavily in that. I've been doing this work for 30 years. And I'll share another story about this. My heart transplant patient, I was working with him and around his chest, and we were actually, I could actually kind of see in my mind's eye the nerves and the blood vessels, and that all had to, those all had to be all stitched back together. So when they put the heart in, they have to replumb everything. And I could see all that. Well, one day I was working on him, and I got an urge to work on his head. And I started seeing some kind of in this area in the back here, I was seeing kind of some restriction in the blood flow and the movement pattern. So the brain and every single organ in our body actually has a movement pattern. And if that movement pattern isn't working right, that's when I know that there's something that's restricted. Well, the movement pattern wasn't right. And so I started talking to him afterwards, and I said, I noticed this thing in your brain, in the back of your brain. He said, oh yeah, before I had my heart transplant, I had a stroke. Wow. And I didn't know that. And so I started working on that area too. And some of the stuff started resolving around that. Now this stroke had happened 16, 17 years prior. And the tissue was still having a problem getting the right amount of movement and flow that it should be to be healthy. And it was just amazing to see the benefits as we worked. And I worked with this gentleman for 16 years. And the cool thing is he had to go to a cardiologist every year to get everything, make sure the heart was still going. A heart transplant patient typically lives about 16 years post-transplant.
Mhm.
This gentleman lived 22 years.
Wow.
And his cardiologist accredited to the work he was doing outside of the typical medical model. So and the cool thing about that is he was alive to see his granddaughter born, and he got to actually get to know her before he passed.
Aw, that's beautiful.
That's why I do what I do.
I love
I do that because not only did he have a longer life, but he had a better life. He was actually, until 2 weeks before he passed, he was completely cognizant. He was healthy. He ended up going downhill very, very quickly, which is fine with him because that's what he wanted. He didn't want to linger. So it was really an amazing thing to see him just keep going for so
Yeah,
many years.
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. And it's like, when you get to make that difference in somebody else's life, it becomes the fuel for your mission, and wanting to continue to feed that, because it's like, wow, you made that difference. Who else is out there that you can make a difference for, and you become hungry for it?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can experience, attest to that, because I've experienced that myself, with what I do, and it's fun. It's a joy, and it's also fulfilling. It's like, wow, I got to make that difference. And it feels good for everybody. If there was something that happened, out on the highway, and somebody's there to help somebody else, you make that difference. It feels good for the body. It feels good for the soul. It feels good all around in general. But yeah, I love that. How in general will someone know if your therapy is helping them?
Well, the first thing is that they'll feel different. And sometimes at first it may not feel really necessarily good yet, because we're kind of, again, we're unpacking things where it's like if you have a closet that's been stuffed with stuff for a very long time, when you start pulling it out, it kind of makes a little bit of a mess. So at first it might feel a little, it's almost this is an old-fashioned word, but like discombobulating. It's like
Yeah.
like there's just so much there. Not always, but sometimes that does happen. But usually it's we're looking for change, but at first the change might be a little uncomfortable, but as time goes on, one of the biggest things is you start to feel happier in your life. And I know that sounds a little ambiguous, but that's really what we're going for. So one client I had one time, he had a real subtle change. He didn't even notice. He just felt better. He didn't feel necessarily anything physically, but he just felt better. He just felt like he was enjoying his children more and things like that. But he went out and took a long hike with his wife, and then he realized afterwards, he came back and realized that his knee didn't bother him after the hike. Like usually he would have to come home and ice it, and then he called me up and he said, we went on this long hike and I didn't have to put my knee up with ice on it for 2 hours afterwards.
Wow.
Another thing is that they might feel happier. Again, like I said before, my heart transplant patient starting his hobby again, where he was actually propagating those violets, and he actually brought me one. I still have it, and which is wonderful. But he started doing something that he loved. Somebody might pick up a musical instrument that they haven't picked up in a while. I had one client said that she noticed she stopped snapping at her kids and her husband at the end of the day. So happiness is just a sure sign that something really wonderful is taking place, and that to me is a really good sign of healing. I don't know if I'm sure you're as much of an Abraham Hicks fan as I am, but
I am.
one of the things that Abraham talks about is that we can tell that we're in more alignment with our inner beings when we're happy and when we feel better. And that's truly what we're doing, is we're allowing that inner being to express itself more thoroughly in our lives and in our bodies. And happiness is that sure sign.
Yeah. I love Abraham Hicks, and I love that you shared that too, because I discovered Abraham Hicks, well over 10 years ago, and it was like, wow, I had no idea. And just the truth that they speak and the wisdom that they share. You know, there's some people listening right now that have never heard of Abraham Hicks, you know, and yet there's, you know, information that I've been informed of for well over 10 years. And the difference that that wisdom has made in my life, as well as many other mentors. I've had, you know, countless mentors, and I always I love that wisdom. I love that truth. I love how it kind of pulls you towards your truth. You can feel it. You know,
Right.
like some people are like, well, how do you know? And I'm like, it's a feeling. You follow. Truth has a certain feeling, and you follow it, and you know in your core when something's truth versus, you know, when it's not. Do you ever do anything with the body? I always do muscle testing. I had a chiropractor work with me back in 2009, 2010, and he was telling me all about muscle testing, and I was like, what is muscle testing? And he said, you know, you can put your fingers together and literally pull them. And I was like, well, how does that work? And he said, well, you know, you can say a truth, like my name is Misty, and then it would be strong. And then you can say a lie, like my name is Sarah, and then it's weak. And it pulls apart. It's not strong. Your fingers, it has a different feeling with it being weak versus strong. And that's how you know that there's a truth versus a false. And so your body knows when, like, you go to the grocery store and let's say, you know, you're buying something and you're unsure of whether you want it or not. Sometimes I'll be right there in the store and I'll be like, you know, is this good for me, or is this something my body wants? And then I'll be like, yes, it does. Or, you know, if I'm trying to, you know, try to making a good decision, you know, I'll do the muscle testing, and it'll either be weak, you know, which is a no, or strong when it won't pull apart. You can feel strength. Do you have you followed any of that type of work, or is that something that you do?
Oh yes, I think it's so funny because, again, being the science geek that I was, or that I am, when I first heard about that, I was like, oh, here we go. You know, I was rolling my eyes. And believe it or not, it was actually at a massage conference, a 4-state massage conference, when I first heard of this. And I tried it for myself, and the thing that I tested ended up coming true later on, and I was totally floored. But again, it goes back to the fact that our bodies have intelligence, that
Yes.
we're not a body, we're a spirit in a body, and the spirit is what is informing our body, and the spirit knows a heck of a lot more than we give it credit for. So once I learned this and got this into my being as a knowing, it totally made sense to me that would work. And so, yeah, I do that. I actually do that for people for sure. It's not something I do a lot of, but like if somebody has a question about a certain supplement or a food, I actually had a gal come in one time, and she was taking a particular supplement, and the company had gone from it being in a powder form that she could mix in water to capsules. And she said, I don't know, I just don't feel as good these days. And I would you test, maybe I don't need it anymore. And so she came in and we tested it, and sure enough, she was pretty weak on it. And I just got this inkling. I thought, you know, can I try some? I said, can I waste one of your capsules? And she said, sure. So I took the capsule apart and took the powder out, and I tested her just on the capsule. It was the capsule. It was a gelatin capsule, and her body didn't like it. And so she actually wrote to the company and told them, and they went to a veggie cap, and then she was fine.
Wow.
So it can be something as simple as a binding agent or a coloring or a flavoring. I know I don't do well with artificial colors or flavors. I just don't feel good. And that's one of the things I like to work with my clients is I help them become aware. I'll actually give kind of self-awareness homework. Sometimes sometimes it's a breathing pattern thing. Sometimes it's a mindset, self-talk kind of thing. Sometimes it's postural. I mean, if I have somebody coming in and they're walking around with a sunken chest, I get them to stand up and like really lift their chest up, because that's a huge piece. Again, that's a feedback loop into our brain about what our place is in the world. So when I'm doing that with the muscle testing or with my work, is I can give them some things to kind of start to pay attention to. And one of them is, how do you feel when you eat certain foods? If you do eat a lot of fast food, and it's not that I'm saying fast food is necessarily bad for you. I don't think it's the greatest, but some people seem to be okay with it. But I tell them, go off of it for a week or two, don't eat any, and then eat some of it and see how you feel. But take the time to see how you feel. And a lot of times people will just like, oh man, I can't believe. Well, I mean, I heard a story about one guy it wasn't my client, but it was somebody else's, and he did that, and he's like, I can't believe I was eating this stuff after I quit eating it, started eating it, and he said, it tastes like garbage. I can't believe I was eating it. He was eating it so quickly and while he was driving that he never tasted it before.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so self-awareness is huge. It's really, really big. So I do work with people on that.
Yeah, I've noticed, I mean, I've done so many experiments with food, just in how my body reacts to it, and observing myself and my thoughts and my feelings and everything after 30 minutes after I eat. And if I feel like crap, then it's like, okay, well, then I don't want to put that in my mouth anymore. And for a while there, while I was transitioning, and every once in a while I still will crave chocolate, but you just notice the kind of the sluggishness that you feel when you eat something. Maybe it's chocolate, or maybe it's, you wanted some ice cream or something and you're just craving it. I really started to observe, it's like, okay, is my ego craving that? I'm wanting to go into like a brain fog and go into what some people that I've been around have called a food coma. And I'm like, I'm gonna be in a food coma. And then I'm like, well, I better not be doing any work or need to be present for anybody, because I certainly don't want to, be in some sort of a brain fog while I'm working with somebody. But it's just interesting how food really reflects how we feel and how we think. Do you give people diets, or do you recommend certain foods, or do you do any type of food work with people?
Not in the traditional sense. What I like to talk about, and again, this goes back to Abraham Hicks, is as much as I don't think there's a one size fits all diet. First of all, I know too many people that have tried to talk other people into their diet, and it really turned out badly. But one of the things that Abraham likes to talk about is how you feel about it, and it's whether it's food or exercise, movement type things, or a therapy. If you don't feel good about it, then don't do it. So all this talk about years ago was, the big thing was kale, and all these people say, oh, but I hate kale, but I'm going to eat it because it's good for me. It's like, don't bother. There was a story in I believe it was I'm trying to think who it was that wrote it, Deepak Chopra, I think. But he cited a research study that was done with a group of women from Switzerland and a group of women from like Thailand, Asia somewhere, Thailand or somewhere like that. And they had developed a meal that each meal, the two meals had the same exact nutrient value in them, but one was of one culture and one was of the other. And they had them each eat their own culture's food, and they tested their intake, and then they swapped. And when they swapped, it went down like 40% of what they absorbed. And it was, they didn't like each other's food, because the Thai food is spicy, and northern people don't eat spicy, and vice versa. So it's really important to feel good about what you're eating. So I tell people, if you want that bowl of ice cream, don't feel guilty about it. If you're going to feel guilty about it, don't eat it. Yeah. So I do more things along those lines to get people, again, it's more of a mindset thing about that. If they need nutrition help, or they need herbal remedies, things like that, then I usually will refer out to other people, because those things that takes a lot of education, right? A lot more than I was ever interested in doing. Right. Yeah. Again, because I know that I know you've talked, you and I've talked about the zone diet and eating for your blood type.
Yeah.
And I think those kinds of things are really wonderful to look at, but then you have to kind of test it out for yourself. One of the things I like to do, and I do recommend this if people can do it, is fasting once in a while, not necessarily all the time. I did intermittent fasting for several years and I loved it. I really need to get back to it because I actually feel a lot better.
I do too. I do too. As much as, you know, it's in the moment you're maybe having that craving and it's like, okay, drink some more water, but you almost go through like a detox, and that detox the next day, it's like, wow, you feel so clear and you feel so like your body is so much more awake and aware. And I would say the word sensitive, but it's just like I'm tuned in to your emotions, your feelings. You know, you walk by somebody and you can kind of, you're a little bit more sensitive to the energy and you're just a lot more alert. That's
that and it, your body becomes a lot more responsive to the food that you do eat. So when you go without eating for 24 hours, your body actually learns how to turn on those switches to take care of itself, because again, the body wants to stay in balance. And when we feed it 3 meals a day every day, it never has a reason to turn on those switches. And so they kind of get stuck. It's just like in our car, you know, if you don't use something, after a while you go to turn it on and it's not working properly. It's the same kind of thing in our body. Again, going back to the satellite analogy. So it's our bodies are really meant to, that we're not meant to be in a habit. You do this every single day at the same time.
Yeah.
It's really not.
My third to last question for you: have you ever studied I think it was Isuro Emoto, where he did the studies on water from the movie What the Bleep Do We Know, with the scientist and how he had water from the Fiji dam and he put messages on the bottles of water?
I've not done any work around it. I think it's fascinating. I do know that, again, going back to Abraham Hicks, everything is vibration. Everything is vibration. That's where I could geek out on you, because I'm an Einstein nut. I love quantum physics. I think that stuff's amazing. We literally are more space than we are matter. But it totally makes sense to me that water is a crystalline structure, and so you should, you know, if there's a harmonics around, harmonics is just the way sound waves play off in energy, or energy waves play off, and since we're energy, of course we're going to have that, we can have that effect. That stuff's really, really fascinating.
Yeah, because he had done the study, and what he did was he had put, like, on a sticky note, he'd put the word thank you, and then he'd put the word like love and gratitude, and then he put like 3 negative words, you know, like hate and, you know, disgust or something, you know, there were 3 negative words, and then he did the experiment, let it sit for 24 hours, put it in the freezer or something, and then he looked at it all under a microscope. And what he had noticed was that the bottles that had the positive words on it had formed beautiful crystals, and that the words that had the negative words on the bottles, that water had like black holes, and, you know, it had really shown up under a microscope, not nearly as beautiful as what the other ones with the positive words. And I was fascinated by that, because obviously it was science proving how the words that you speak, even the words that you write down, really impact the environment. You know,
well, and as you know, with what you do, the letters all have a structure to them, an energetic structure, and so that makes total sense. And then that goes back to what we were talking about with food as well. You know, if you have that idea in your head that something is not healthy for you and you eat it, you know, you're actually doing more harm than it's not just benign at that point. It's not, you know, you eat that chocolate chip cookie and you're just gonna might gain a pound from it. It's actually, you know, you're changing the energetic signature of that cookie as it goes into your body by thinking of it in a bad way.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree with it. It's just it's so fascinating. Like I love our conversation, and I love this type of thing. And I obviously can talk about it for hours and hours. And I know we only have so much time here today. But the second to last question: how does being happier equate to better health?
Well, it's an indicator. It's as Abraham likes to share with us, that when you're in alignment with source, you feel happy, you feel good. As a matter of fact, they talk about how to, when you're not feeling good, how to kind of climb that emotional ladder, so to speak, from maybe you're sad or you're depressed. Well, there are certain levels of emotions that you have to go through to feel better. Well, the highest one that's on that ladder is feeling happy and feeling ecstatic and feeling really, really good. Well, if you're not happy, then you're already out of alignment with source, and source
Yeah.
is what keeps us healthy.
Yeah.
And I like to use the analogy of light and dark. There really is no dark, so to speak. Dark is just an absence of light. In the same vein, health, there's no real illness. Illness is just a manifestation of the pinching off of the health that's within us. The health comes from source. It is who we are. And matter of fact, when I put my hands on people's body, that's what I'm looking for first. I don't look at somebody to see what might be what I need to fix. I don't look, and I actually counsel people away from therapists that think that way, and the doctors, our Western medicine's medical system, that's really what they're always trying to fix something, right?
Right.
So alternative health, a good alternative health practitioner is somebody who's actually looking at the wholeness of who you are, and then figuring out where that's getting deflected or pinched off in some way. And the way we know that is happening is when the person starts feeling happier and feeling in a better place. And sometimes they have to go through it's that I'm sure that you're aware of the stages of grief, and one of the stages
Yeah.
is anger. Anger is not necessarily a bad thing. We don't want to stay there because it can get pretty pretty ugly and draining, but
Right.
it's still better than depression. It's still better than sadness, because it gives you the place to take action.
Yeah.
So this is the same thing when I'm working with somebody, depending upon where they are when we get started. Sometimes they do go through an anger phase, and I've had some people lash out, and I tell them I don't take it personally, but if they want to be healthier, they have to get through that and move on to hope and to joy and to feeling good, because that's when you know that you're aligning with that place inside you that is health, that is
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
that health comes from.
I love that. Thank you. Like I said, I love our conversation. I'm fascinated by this type of topic. Obviously, I could talk about it for hours, and I would love to have you on the show again so we can continue the conversation at some point. But lastly, Robin, how can people get in touch with you for more information? And somebody who is fascinated by what you do and is looking like, hey, this is something that can really support me. What is the best way for them to reach out to you? Besides, we're going to put everything in the chat box below, but what is
Right.
the best way to reach you?
Really, sort of the best way is just to either call or text me. And I know you'll put the number in the box, but it's 719-520-3801. Or you can find me on Facebook, either at Bountiful Health, my work page, or my personal page, which is Robin Tapp. And I'll share too. I forgot to say that one of the things that I've added recently, because of the whole COVID thing and not being as accessible to work with people in person, is I do some phone work too, and Zoom. I could do stuff over Zoom as well, and it's called body focusing, and where I actually have we talk through basically what I would do with my hands, and let that person be, again, it's the person doing the work anyway, so we can do that over the phone as well. We can kind of start honing in on places where that's uncomfortable in the person's body, and try to unwrap that a little bit to provide a little more health to process through that. So yeah, you're welcome to text me or call me.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for sharing that, and I'm a tremendous value with what you've offered today for the listeners and for people who, you know, are unfamiliar with this. You know, obviously this is a great information. It's a great way for people to discover what might be holding them back or what might be, you know, a missing that they were unaware of. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your knowledge, and for being on the show today, because it really does make a difference. It might have changed somebody's life today. You never know, you know, who's.
Well, I really appreciate your having me on, Misty. I love what you do, and I would love to continue the conversation. So thank you so
Yes,
much for having me. I do appreciate it.
absolutely. And for everybody who's listening, Robin Tapp, definitely get in touch with her. She's amazing, and lots of testimonies of work that she's done of people that love her. She's in Colorado Springs, you know, but you can reach her by phone no matter where you're at. So that's a great avenue to be in contact with her. Again, we're going to have the information below. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for joining, and tune in next week as we're going to bring all the ladies back together for conscious conversations. And Robin Tapp is one of those people as well. So we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you again, Robin, for being on the show today, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. Have a fabulous weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.